Sorry, I was still muted. Good evening and welcome to the first town hall of the College of Registered Dental Hygienists of Alberta. I'd like to begin tonight by acknowledging that we are on Treaty 6 territory, a traditional meeting ground, gathering place, and traveling route of the Cree, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, Dene, and Nakota Sioux. Alberta is a traditional and ancestral territory of many people, presently subject to Treaties 6, 7, and 8. We acknowledge all of the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit whose footsteps have marked these lands for centuries. My name is Kathy Soos. I'm your council president and I'm also a registered dental hygienist. Our current council is made up of 6 regulated members and 6 public members. Together we serve as the governing body of the college. Our focus is to set the strategic goals and objectives for the college, which are implemented at the direction of the registrar. The past few years have been a time of great change for the regulations of the profession between new government legislation and the COVID-19 pandemic. We all have been working and learning through ongoing challenges. The college and council are committed to advancing regulations of the profession and protecting the public through the provision of safe, competent, and quality oral health for all Albertans. We are working to accomplish this through the framework of a strategic plan. This plan outlines 4 goals that I want to briefly run through. Firstly, to embrace leading regulatory practices to protect the public. It is imperative for us to be a leader in regulation as it changes in order to keep the public safe and uphold the standards of the profession. Secondly, to identify and strengthen relationships with our stakeholders. This includes you, our registrants, as well as the public, the Government of Alberta, and other regulatory colleges. Next, to ensure a strong understanding of the college's role amongst our stakeholders. We hope that tonight provides the opportunity to further understand the college's roles and mandates. Finally, to achieve effective governance and strong leadership to support our mandate. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us tonight. The college is committed to being accountable and transparent, and tonight's event is one small part of the meeting those values. I hope you find the evening valuable and informative. And with that, I would now like to hand over the evening to College Registrar Amy Dowell.
Hi everybody, thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Amy and I'm the Registrar and CEO for the college. I've been with the college since September 2019 and I was a dental hygienist for a few years previous to that, but before joining the college I spent over 10 years working in primary care, so working with family physicians and in primary care networks. I'm happy to be here tonight. I'm looking forward to this presentation. Unfortunately, we can't be in person, so we hope that this platform works well, and we hope you learn a lot about the college and your role in self-regulation this evening. I'm going to pass it off to Salima to introduce herself.
Hi everyone, my name is Salima. I am the Director of Regulatory Affairs and I've been with the college now since September of 2020. My role involves primarily implementation of everything under the Health Professions Act, such as registration, renewal, reinstatement, as well as the continuing competence program, and also to improve processes and efficiencies. So one example of that is our shift from paper processes to online processes. I've been a dental hygienist for the last almost 16 years. I've also done a master's in public health, and I've recently started working on a doctorate in educational leadership, particularly in community leadership, which is actually going to give me an opportunity to start looking at some of the scholarly research around competence of professionals, which can hopefully inform a stronger continuing competence program, as our government has indicated a desire to have that. So I'm really looking forward to engaging with all of you in your questions later on today after the presentation, and thank you for joining us this evening. I will pass it on to Martha now, who is one of our compliance advisors.
Hello and welcome. My name is Martha Benoit, and I'm one of the compliance advisors at the CRDHA. I may have had the opportunity to speak to some of you on occasion. Typically, or primarily, my role with the CRDHA is to provide support to registrants, members of the public, and other stakeholders, including government, Alberta Health Services, other regulators, mostly on how to interpret the legislation as it applies to dental hygienists practicing in Alberta. Of course, some of this legislation also includes the Health Professions Act, Dental Hygiene Regulation, our practice standards, Code of Ethics, and other resources. But it can also include other legislation such as Health Information Act, Government Organization Act, Occupational Health and Safety, and the list goes on. I'm also involved with the CRDHA on doing some projects internally, and these are sometimes FAQs, infection prevention and control guidelines, occupational health and safety guidelines, and of course everybody's familiar with our COVID-19 guidelines. So that's just a little snapshot at some of what I do with the college. I'll now turn the presentation over to Amy, who's going to run you through a presentation that's going to outline some of what we're doing organizationally and as well review some of this new legislation coming into place. Have a great evening, everyone.
Thanks, Martha. So I'm hoping everybody can see my slides. It should say CRDHA Town Hall. I'm actually not seeing any of you anymore, so I'm literally just talking into a screen. So I want to run through a presentation this evening. There we go. Okay, so we have about a 45-minute presentation for you tonight, and we'll be covering lots of different topics, including an overview of regulation and legislation, and many of the changes that we are going to be seeing as a college over the next 1 to 2 years. We are also going to be addressing how these changes are going to be affecting you as a regulated health professional. So we've gotten actually a lot of questions from you around colleges and associations and what about our fees and stuff. So we're going to really dive into all those topics and hopefully answer a lot of your questions tonight. So we're going to really start with dental hygiene regulation in Alberta. And so I just want to start at the highest level and talk very quickly about regulation. So in our society, there are certain professions that perform work that could be dangerous to the public. So as a result, many of these professions have to have a certain level of oversight in order to ensure that the public stays safe. So professions that could harm a patient or a client are typically regulated, and that would include doctors, nurses, chiropractors, physios, acupuncturists, even like engineers or lawyers. All of these professions have been deemed to do activities that could harm the public. And this also includes oral health professionals like dental hygienists. We're definitely included in that group. So how does regulation work? Basically, the government works with each profession to set the legislation and the regulation, and then the professions actually do the regulating. So you can see here in the slide that some of the restricted activities that dental hygienists are trained to do, all of these activities could harm the public if they're not done correctly. So imagine if anyone with any level of education, or maybe with no education at all, were allowed to perform these activities on a member of the public. It would actually be a disaster. So regulation actually sets the minimum educational requirements, the registration requirements, the ongoing competency requirements to ensure that these restricted activities are done properly by highly trained and competent professionals, so that members of the public feel safe to go and get dental hygiene treatment. I want to take a quick step back and review the journey of regulation in Alberta, as it really sets the stage for where we have been in regulation and where we need to go. So in 1951, the very first Alberta dental hygienist obtained her dental hygiene education in Michigan, and then she returned to Alberta to practice. And 8 years later, there were 9 there were 9 dental hygienists in Alberta, so 9 working, and all of these 9 dental hygienists, they weren't regulated. Then in 1961, the U of A enrolled its very first class of dental hygiene students, and there were 19 graduates from that class. They graduated in 1963. And members from that first graduating class started the Alberta Dental Hygienists Association, or how we would know it as the ADHA. And they actually made the very first request for self-regulation. However, this request was unsuccessful. So the profession continued to grow throughout the 70s and the 80s. And even through that, all that time, it remained unregulated. And then by around the early 1990s, there were around 700 dental hygienists working in Alberta, and they were still all unregulated. But on November 1st, 1990, Alberta dental hygienists became self-regulated under the Dental Disciplines Act. And the ADHA at that time became the regulatory authority for Alberta dental hygienists. So that meant that the ADHA now became responsible for setting entry to practice requirements and for establishing and monitoring continuing competency, and also for the discipline of the registrants. However, something really significant happened with this legislation. A supervision requirement was inserted into the Act at the very last minute. So up until that time, even though dental hygienists weren't regulated, they also weren't working under supervision. And in 1991, under the Dental Disciplines Act, the supervision clause came in, and that had never existed before. So as soon as that act was signed, the ADHA immediately started to advocate to remove that supervision clause. That supervision clause stayed in effect for around 10 years until 2000, well, actually 15 years. But in 2001, the HPA, the Health Professions Act, was proclaimed. And this was new legislation that actually oversaw many different health professionals in Alberta. And in 2006, dental hygienists came under that Health Professions Act. So the Dental Disciplines Act went away, and they came under the Health Professions Act. And this was significant for a couple of reasons. One, the removal of the supervision clause happened. So finally, registered dental hygienists in Alberta could work independently and in a standalone profession. And this actually was when the ADHA officially became the CRDHA. So I'm just going to make that point really clear. This is when the association became the college. And that was a pretty big moment in the history of regulation in Alberta. And finally, the third thing that really happened under this new regulation is that this gave Alberta the greatest scope of practice across Canada, so that meaning that Alberta registered dental hygienists could perform more restricted activities compared to the other provinces under this new legislation. So really significant. So since 2006, regulation in dental hygiene in Alberta has been fairly stable. But at the end of last year, so December 2020, the Alberta government released a new bill, and this new bill is called Bill 46, and it is the greatest set of amendments to the HPA since 2001. So I'm going to be talking more about Bill 46 throughout this presentation. I wanted to kind of go through this a little bit, this history, because it's important to understand this journey, because self-regulation wasn't just granted to dental hygienists in Alberta, it was fought for. There were many dental hygienists who advocated and fought to be self-regulating profession. And that's really important to understand as we move forward. So what does self-regulation mean? Essentially just means that the government, with the help of the profession, sets the legislation, and then the profession gets to regulate themselves. And it is actually deemed a privilege. So it's a privilege for a profession to be able to regulate itself, and it should never be taken lightly. However, I wanted to introduce a new term, and that's something that we're starting to see more and more, and it's called co-regulation. And so what that means is that we're moving into more co-regulation with the government. So the government is starting to have more oversight over the regulation of your profession. And the way we're seeing this happen is from all these new bills that are being proclaimed. So you may be familiar with some of these, but I'll go over them really quickly. Bill 11 came to us last year, and basically it means that there's going to be greater oversight of our registration processes. It's called the Fair Registration Practices Act. And there's a new fair registration office that will be responsible for doing audits of all of the college's registration processes. So that's one area where the government is going to have more oversight over how the college does its registration. Bill 21 came into effect, and many of you are familiar with that one. It's the new legislation that protects patients from sexual abuse or sexual misconduct. Part of that new legislation is mandatory education, so which you are all required to complete by the end of 2020. So anyone new registering with us from now on is also going to be required to take the Bill 21 training, and that wasn't just for us, that was for all the colleges under the Health Professions Act. Bill 30 is a new bill. It's increasing the number of public members on our councils and our committees from 25% to 50%. That bill became effective April 1st of this year. So we're going to start to see more public members joining our council very shortly. And then finally, Bill 46. And again, it's going to be the most extensive set of amendments to the Health Professions Act since the Health Professions Act came into force in 2001. So you can kind of see that these new bills, with these new bills comes greater oversight and accountability. And this is a trend not only in regulation in Canada, but actually across the world. So we're starting to see a lot more of that idea of co-regulation happening. So let's talk really briefly about our current legislation. So the Health Professions Act is legislation that's implemented by the government of Alberta to provide a common regulatory framework for all the health professions in Alberta. And this legislation allows health professionals to self-regulate their profession while being accountable to the government. So quick facts about the HPA. It was proclaimed in 2001. There's currently 29 colleges underneath this Health Professions Act. Over 100,000 regulated healthcare professionals are under this act, and dental hygienists came under the act in 2006. So each profession also has their own regulation, and so these are rules that are specific to each profession. So these rules would include things like requirements for registration. So do we need a criminal record check? Do we need successful completion of CPR? Do we need something like a jurisprudence exam? So those rules are found underneath the regulation. The renewal requirements are also there. So when we're saying you need 600 practice hours in a 3-year cycle, not just making that up, it's actually in the regulation. Continuing competence programs, that rules are not necessarily the rules, but how you set that program up is in the regulations. So if you're wondering where the 45 credits came from, you'll find it in the regulations. Same thing with restricted activities and protected titles and a whole bunch of other things that end up being specific to the dental hygiene profession. So sometimes we'll get asked, like, why do we do things, or why do you have to renew every year, or why do you need to get continuing competence credit? So most of those questions about why we do things at the college specific to the profession are either found under the HPA or your regulation. So what's changing? So the HPA has actually not changed in 20 years, and self-regulation has been very stable. But Bill 46 is opening up the HPA, and it's making significant changes that's not only going to affect the legislation, but also our regulation, the bylaws, our standard of practice, our guidelines, our code of ethics. It's really, we have to rewrite almost all of our documents. There's going to be some new enabling amalgamation language in the Health Professions Act. So it means that colleges will be permitted to merge or amalgamate into one college if they choose. So for instance, many of you may have heard that in British Columbia, their government is actually enforcing amalgamation. Their government has said we want to move from 26 colleges down to 5 colleges. And so they're, excuse me, they're going through that process right now. We're not seeing that in Alberta through this amendment. What we're seeing is that the Health Professions Act is going to enable amalgamations if colleges so choose to do it. And one of the things that's the most significant change that most people are talking about right now is the requirement for the complete separation between colleges and associations. And this is not only having a significant impact on our college, but all of the colleges under the Health Professions Act. So let me just explain that one a little further. So there's definitely confusion about the difference between what is an association and what is a college. We get phone calls or emails daily from registrants calling us and calling to find out more about their association. So I would like to take a couple minutes and just explain the difference. So the difference between a college and association is the mission or purpose for why those two organizations exist. The college exists to protect the public, and registration with the college is mandatory if you want to practice as a health professional in Alberta. Associations exist to advocate on behalf of their members. So you would be most familiar with the CRDHA as the college and the CDHA as your national association. Recently, there's been a launch of a new provincial association called the DHAA, which is separate from both the CDHA, which is the national association, and us at the college. Colleges and associations can work together. They can work together to advance the profession. However, they need to be different to avoid potential conflicts of interest. And Bill 46 absolutely requires a clear separation between advocacy for the profession and the responsibilities to protect the public. So here's a more practical example that would be a good comparison. So everyone who wants to drive in Alberta needs to have a valid driver's license. In order to get that license, you need to pass a driver's test and you need to prove that you're a safe driver. So every few years, you need to renew your license to keep driving. You have to pay off your tickets that you may have accumulated. You're also at risk of losing your license if you break too many of the rules. So there's really strict regulations around who can drive and who can't, and how do you maintain your license. I think that we can all agree that we don't want people to get driver's license and drive vehicles if they're not competent or safe drivers. But people also have the option of joining the Alberta Motor Association. The key term here is association. This is a member-supported organization that provides membership benefits to those who sign up. So personally, I pay for my AMA membership every year because I tend to drive over 2 to 3 nails a year, and I always rely on the AMA to come and fix my tires wherever I am. The AMA also offers discounts on travel and insurance and movie tickets and ski tickets. So membership with the AMA is not mandatory. It's a choice, and people choose to join the association. But registration with Alberta registries to obtain your license is mandatory if you want to drive in Alberta. There are no member benefits with a driver's license except that you get to drive. Similarly, there are no member benefits with your practice permit except that you get to practice dental hygiene in Alberta. So if we're looking for a comparison between what's the difference between college and association, this is probably a pretty good relevant example of how you would distinguish between the two. So big question of the day, college or association, what the heck is the CRDHA? So the CRDHA, like if you go back to one of the beginning slides, it's been a regulatory college since 2006. And you can see that right in our name. We're called the College of Registered Dental Hygienists Alberta. And here are some other examples of other colleges in Alberta that are under the Health Professions Act. So the pharmacists, the optometrists, the denturists, the assistants, LPNs, the little this little CPSA, that's the College of Physicians and Surgeons. None of these are associations. I also pulled over the College of Dental Hygienists of Ontario and the College of Dental Hygienists of British Columbia. Those are the regulatory bodies for dental hygienists in BC and Ontario. Also, just strictly colleges. However, there are some colleges under the Health Professions Act that are both a college and an association. So for example, CARNA, which is a college of association, is a college and association of registered nurses of Alberta. There's the physiotherapists, the chiropractors, and the respiratory therapists. All of them, although they're under the Health Professions Act, they have a dual mandate of association and college. And then the one that causes the greatest amount of confusion for oral health professionals is ADNC. So this is the Alberta Dental Association and College. So 50% of ADNC's mandate is public safety and 50% of their mandate is advocacy and membership benefits. So a lot of times we'll get asked, like, why aren't you doing the same things as AD&C? Well, we can't because we're 100% college and they have dual mandates. However, this all changes with Bill 46. All of these joint colleges and associations are going to be required to separate by the end of 2022. And most of them, or all of them, I believe, are working very hard at doing that right now. So while there's no official list of what outlines what exactly is an association responsibility, there's general consensus amongst all of the colleges under the Health Professions Act that whatever is not in the Health Professions Act is actually not a regulatory, is not a regulatory college's responsibility. So I'm going to give you some examples. So negotiating and setting professional fees. So a good example of this is fee guides. So dental hygienists in Alberta, they don't have a fee guide. Dentists have a fee guide, and it's released by AD&C, but it's released by the association part of AD&C. We don't have at this point in time, or we haven't had up to this point in time, a provincial association. We don't have a fee guide. Collecting fees on behalf of an association, hosting conferences, awards, donations, bursaries, offering of professional liability insurance, and annual general meetings. These are all deemed association responsibilities. Same thing with employment advice and member support, networking and social events and job boards and advocacy or lobbying for the profession. These would all be seen as association responsibilities. You also see some terminology that will be changing. So we've already shifted towards registrant versus a member. A member means you're a member of something. A registrant means that you're registered with a college. And so we use the term registrant versus an association would use the term member. You'll start to see some shifting around some of the council language. So currently we use the term president. So Kathy is our council president. We'll most likely be shifting to council chair and vice chair, because those are more along the lines of regulatory versus president and vice president would be seen as more association. So big question, if the CRDJ can't provide membership benefits, then what exactly do we do? And so it's really clearly stated in the Health Professions Act that colleges must carry out their activities and govern their regulated members in a manner that protects and serves the public interest. But what does that mean? We know that many of you only interact with us once upon registration and then once a year upon renewal. So you don't actually get to see what we do every day. And so we totally understand why there's confusion about like what else do we do? So this slide's going to kind of go through some of the key things that we do. It's not a full list, but it does talk about a lot of the bigger buckets. There's many complexities to regulating a profession, so hopefully this overview helps. So we spend quite a lot of time and resources on registration. Registration is a beast, and the process changes depending on who's registering and where they're coming from and what experience they have and what training they have and where did they get their education. So we have many tools that we use for registration, including the national competencies and exams, both national exams and provincial exams, program reviews and conditions and supervised practice and accreditation. There are all kinds of things that we would take into consideration when someone comes and says they want to register in Alberta to be a dental hygienist. It also becomes more complex when people are registering with us from other provinces, especially if they're coming under the free trade agreement. So there's all kinds of different rules around that as well. And because Alberta has the greatest scope of practice, we really need to ensure that everyone we give a practice permit to will be able to work competently under that scope of practice. So like I said, registration is huge, and we do spend a lot of time and resources there. We have many tools that we use to assess competency, and they come in the form of exams, quite often. So we work really closely with other jurisdictions and other stakeholders to create and maintain different exams, including the jurisprudence exam, quality assessment exam, some self-assessments that were under development. We're also very involved in the national exam, both the written board exam and potential clinical exam. So there's lots of work that goes into examinations. Of course, you're all really familiar with renewal, so that takes up a large chunk of our time and resources. Typically between August and November, we're really spending a lot of time on renewals. And then continuing competence is ongoing work, and it's going to become an even larger larger portion of our regulatory responsibilities under Bill 46, as the regulatory world in general is moving towards more evidence-based competency processes. So we do have some work to do in redefining our continuing competence processes. So there are lots of work that we have to do with standards of practice and code of ethics and guidelines and bylaws. So we know that the profession is not stable, and it's changing even faster with changes in technology. So we're always getting all these questions coming in about, you know, virtual care and oral facial myology and laser, and the questions just keep coming in terms of the opportunities for what could happen in the profession. But we need to maintain and undergo significant updates to make sure our standards of practice and our guidelines are staying up to date, so that we can help to guide the profession in how to practice safely. Professional conduct is actually a significant portion of our work. So we have team members that are dedicated to working directly with members of the public and members of the profession to manage the complaints that come. Not all complaints go to formal complaints. A lot of them stay informal, but there's a lot of work that needs to do in terms of understanding the complaint and doing the investigation and writing the reports and making a lot of decisions. And so we do have a team that helps with that. And government relations, we can't advocate directly with the government for the profession, but we are partners with the government. So we have to ensure we spend the time and energy working with our government partners and the federation groups that are set up to be the voice for the healthcare colleges. And of course, we spend time on communication and communication tools that support regulation. So this list is not exhaustive, but it actually, I hope that it helps outline some of the responsibilities that we do on a daily basis that you wouldn't necessarily see or be aware of. I also thought this visual would be helpful in showing how the college is set up within the regulatory framework. So at the top, you have the government, which is responsible for creating that legislation and that oversight. Then you have your council, which is made up of 50% dental hygienists and 50% public members. And they're responsible for the oversight of regulating the profession. So they spend a lot of time on our mission, our vision, our values, and developing the strategic plan, similar to what Kathy was talking about in her introduction. They need to ensure that there's bylaws, and they oversee the standards of practice and the code of ethics. They're also very much involved in risk management. So as the profession is changing, they're really starting to become aware of what the risks are, what the opportunities are, how do we proactively start to manage some of these things, and what do we need to do internally to prepare to manage some of these risks. They also establish our fees, like practice permit fees, and they're the appeal body if there's any sort of appeals for any of the complaints. They ultimately need to make all the decisions in the best interest of the public, but they're the strategic body for your profession. And then below that red dotted line is the operational arm. So the college is seen as the operational arm, and that's made up of myself as the registrar, and then the whole team and volunteers and contractors and staff that make up our college team. And then finally, you have the registrants, which is the registered dental hygienists at the bottom. They register, you guys register with the college, and you benefit from working in a profession that's self-regulated. So my apologies. So even though each of these parts have their own responsibilities individually, this whole structure works together to ensure that the profession is regulated properly. So I hope the information that's been presented so far has helped to clear up any questions about self-regulation and the difference between a college and association. But I actually would like to take a few minutes to discuss why there is this lingering confusion about the role of the college. So historically, the CRDHA, like most colleges, have maintained some association responsibilities. And this is especially true for our college because the profession has never had a provincial association to take on some of these tasks. So we took this figure from the 2006 annual report, and it clearly broke up our role or our responsibilities into 3 sections. So the first one is the over 50% was around the regulatory responsibilities. So again, it goes back to the registration and competence, practice standards, code of ethics, professional conduct. 11% was geared towards governance, so that oversight of the profession. And then in this annual report, 38% was put towards advancement of the profession. And so that's where stuff like continuing education and employment issues and member awards were allocated. And that trend continued every year since then. So this came from the annual report in 2018, and you'll see that those 3 key areas still exist. And even though some of the tasks within these categories, some of the terminology has changed over time. So the ability for the college to continue to allot money or time or resources into things that would be considered association tasks is actually no longer permitted under Bill 46. So this whole access and advancement area needs to be rethought out, and that's what we're going to talk about next. So clearly, next question, and the most popular one that we get, is since the college can't perform association functions anymore, will we get a reduction or permit fees? So we're just going to be completely transparent because everybody's asking. So here's the answer. College fees were previously broken down into 3 sections. So the first section would have been the $174 that we would have collected for our CRDHA membership fee. And then we collected $425 for the practice permit fee. So that totaled up to $599. We also collected the CDHA membership fee. So it was $216 or $233, depending on if you chose $1 million or $2 million in professional liability insurance. We at the college never kept that money. We would collect it, but all that money would go to CDHA so that you would have a membership with CDHA, so you would have your professional liability insurance. So moving forward, we're no longer collecting CDHA fees. We're not actually going to be permitted to collect any association fees. And we're going to maintain the $599, but we're going to get rid of that terminology of membership, and we're going to just call it a practice permit fee, and it's going to be $599. So I'm sure this wasn't the answer you were hoping for, but I think it's really important for you to understand how this money is going to be used to regulate your profession. So here's the breakdown of the fees. And I know that this is really hard to see all the details, so I have a table in the next slide that actually goes into more detail. But what I would like you to see here is that almost 45% of your fees are allocated towards salary and expenses. So this may seem shocking, but until the college starts getting into artificial intelligence, the only real way that we can actually ensure that the regulatory requirements that we're required to do to regulate the profession is done through people. So for example, in order to handle complaints that comes in, we need a complaints director, and we need a hearings director, and we need investigators. So we need this team to handle the complaints. In order to do the registration and renewals, although we have a database, we have a team to process a lot of those applications, and we develop and administer exams, and we work with other stakeholders across the country to help transfer dental hygienists to other provinces. And all of the things that I was talking about earlier around registration, it's all done by people. So we have forms and we have paper and we have some computer programs, but it's not getting done without the team to support it. We have trained inspectors to perform inspections, and we have skilled communication and HR and finance people to make sure that we're doing everything correctly for operations. And we hire practice advisors, and we're changing the name to compliance advisors, but Martha and Alicia, who many of you are very familiar with, they help answer all your questions about regulations. We can't create a recording to help with that. We're paying our team to do this. And then of course there's the management and the support team around it. So all these tasks that we do require people to get them done, and that's why the majority of the fee goes towards those salaries and expenses. I'm going to go to the next slide so you can see the table, because it breaks down the rest. So you can see that along with the team for professional conduct, there's another 10% of your fees that goes towards investigation and legal fees, and then the hearing tribunal. So professional conduct uses a lot of legal support to help as well. So 10% of your fees are allocated towards that. Excuse me for a second. Approximately 6% of the fees go toward council and committees. So all the committees that we have and then the council, there's some expenses that go along with making sure that that is done properly. Just under 10% is put towards continuing competence. 1% towards communications, so that would be our website and any kind of consultants that we use and our annual report. About 20% is around the fixed operational costs. So those of you who own your own practice, you know that running a business is expensive. So we have all of the same things a business would have. So we have rent and insurance, telephone and security. We have to pay for an annual financial audit. We have printing and supplies and postage. We have bank charges, lease equipment, computer equipment, IT services and subscriptions. We pay for accreditation. We have annual levies for the Alberta Federation of Regulated Health Professionals and the Federation of Dental Hygiene Regulators of Canada. So all of those go into our fixed and variable operational costs. Professional fees. So again, we use contractors and legal and bookkeeping and stuff to support our operations. And then a little bit around the mandatory remittances. So altogether that adds up to 100%. I think it's really important for you to understand that this isn't, we're a fully functioning operation. We're a business, not for profit, obviously, but that's how the breakdown goes. So one of the things I want to address is how we're going to be reallocating some of the association responsibilities into college responsibilities. So you're going to see in this table that many of the tasks outlined here on the left-hand side of this slide would have been coded under that 30%, that 30 to 38% for the advancement of profession goals. But many of those things are not going away. They're just being recoded into regulatory responsibilities. So let me explain a few of them. So before Bill 36, we would have practice advisors, so Martha and Alicia. Now, it's a conversation happening with all the colleges, but there's a recognition that having dedicated support where not only members of the public, but yourselves as registrants can call or email to ask questions about is invaluable from a regulatory perspective. So we're changing the name to compliance advisors, but we're keeping the positions. We need to ensure that we're not giving advice on employment issues or advocacy of the profession, but the majority of the calls we get already today are more in line with regulation. How do I interpret advertising guidelines, or can you help me understand my scope of practice, or there's this guideline like can I do nitrous oxide, or talk to me about sedation. And really the majority of the calls that we take are already in line with regulatory questions. So that cost or that expense that was incorporated in the 30% before Bill 36 stays with us. So we'll keep with that. Continuing education and things like the pharmacy course that would have been developed using those funds, they would have been coded under that 30%. We're just transitioning that into continuing education and competency development. And so we need to ensure that our competencies are up to date. So our local anesthetic competencies, our prescribing competencies, ortho restorative, and just general competencies. We do need to spend the time in updating and ensuring that we have, we're keeping up to date with changes in the environment. Same thing with continuing education. Although the majority of continuing education usually is developed by an association, there is a rule for colleges to do continuing education. We just need to ensure that it's in line with the continuing education for regulation. So an example is record keeping, or social media, or advertising, or scope of practice, or how to be a professional. So there's a lot of things that we can do to ensure that we can provide continuing education, as long as it's done in a way that it's tied to legislation and regulation. Costs for the newsletter. So you know that there would have been previously 4 print magazines a year. A lot of that gets translated into online resources, and online resources aren't free. They just are a different type of expense. So we pay for our subscription services to host different types of electronic communications. The website would have been coded in that 30%. We need a website. It's actually under the Health Professions Act that the colleges need a website. So those costs just get translated into that. There are going to be a few things that we're not going to be able to easily transition between association and college, and they would be that continuing education event. But luckily that was a zero cost for us. We had to put the money in to develop the event, but then through the fees, we just got it back, and it ended up not costing the college anything. Awards and fee negotiations with the government, and council elections and donations, things like that. There's really no replacement for it, and we don't necessarily have a place for that to go. But if you take a look at the total cost of that, that it adds up to about 1.7% of our total overall revenue, and so which just ends up being less than $10 per registrant. So instead of lowering your fees by $10, we're going to reinvest those fees into improving the college and ensuring that we're keeping up with the changes that we're going to be required to do. So a good example is that in the regulatory world, we're moving towards increased transparency and accountability. We have to. And we're being required to justify everything that we do. And this is going to require us to have better reporting and better data analytics. The systems that we require to support enhanced data and enhanced reporting is going to require an investment in technology. And we understand that this move in this direction means that we need to plan both financially and with our resources to accommodate those changes. We're also experiencing more complex complaints, a greater movement towards competency, more collaboration with colleges. Even though we might not be moving towards amalgamation, we're moving towards more collaboration, and that means a lot more joint projects. And we want to ensure that we're keeping up with all of those changes. So if you remember from Kathy's introduction, one of the main goals is to be a leader in regulation, and being a leader in regulation means that we're ahead and we're pushing the envelope and we're on board with these. But that means that we need the money and the resources and the time to implement all these changes. So that's why your practice fee, permit fee, is not changing. It's not increasing, but it's not being decreased, because we have a plan in terms of how to reallocate so that we're meeting all of the regulations and the changes that are being required of us. So as we near the end of this presentation, I wanted to take a few minutes to go back to this idea of self-regulation and what it actually means for you. So many of the registrants think that the college is a standalone entity and we make up all of these rules, and we're doing things to make your life harder. And I wanted to actually show you how self-regulation actually is done by members of your profession. So you can see how, we'll start with registration. So changes in registration processes, very difficult registrations that come to us. We typically use the registration committee, and we will be using the registration committee more to help us make decisions about registration. And that registration committee is made up of dental hygienists. Same thing with continuing competence. So as we start to advance in our continuing competence program and make changes, the competence committee is a committee made up of dental hygienists that will be helping to guide us in moving in that direction. So there'll be a lot of, there'll be dental hygienists having a say in terms of what that competence program looks like. Standards of practice and code of ethics, they have to be developed with council, but they go to consultation to all dental hygienists in Alberta for feedback before it goes to the government. So there's a lot of opportunity to have your voice heard in the standards of practice and the code of ethics. When we create guidelines, we're going to be coming up with working groups. So for creating a guideline on, let's say, dental hygiene practice owners, for instance, we're going to bring a group of practice owners together to help define those guidelines. Same thing with bylaws. Council oversees their bylaws. Scope of practice and restricted activities have council and committees all involved. And the same thing with advanced restricted activities. When things go through the professional conduct process, and if it goes to hearing, the decision of what happens with that complaint is done by a hearing tribunal. 50% of the people in the hearing tribunal are dental hygienists. Examinations are usually a group of dental hygienists, either nationally or provincially. We partner with the U of A. The national entry to practice competencies that we have just undergone a huge project had Alberta dental hygienists not only on the advisory committee, but also on the expert working group as well. Council and the college work together with the government relations. And then again, the competencies was a national project. So you can see here that dental hygienists are very much involved in all the things around the regulation of the profession. So we know that dental hygienists can harm the public by doing these restricted activities. And if we go back to the beginning of the presentation, there was a slide with all those pictures that showed what kind of harm could be done. And we already know that the profession needs to be regulated, but here's the thing about self-regulation. It doesn't have to be regulated by dental hygienists. There's always the risk that the government could do the regulating or potentially another profession. So I wanted to remind you that you do have a voice in regulating your profession. And I wanted to give a quick example. We sent out an email asking for people, dental hygienists, to put their names forward to sit on the competence committee and also our hearing tribunal. Of the 3,500 dental hygienists that could have put their names forward, we got 4. And we're really lucky. The 4 that put their names forward are great. We're happy to have them join. But this is the opportunity for you to have your voice heard and be part of regulating your profession. So in the end, what does this all mean for you? So a key takeaway is that self-regulation is a privilege. It's really a privilege that you as a dental hygienist get to regulate your profession. And if you don't regulate your profession, somebody else will, because your profession needs to be regulated. So please get involved with your committees and your council, and at a minimum, really understand what it means to be a regulated professional. Know your standards of practice, know your code of ethics, and read the information that comes from the college, because it all has a huge importance to your profession. So that is the whole entire presentation. We did ask for registrants to send us questions. So I have a list of questions that I'm going to go through really quickly. It's up on the screen right now. And then we're going to open it up to live questions and answers. So what that means is that you're going to have the ability to type in any questions you have, and then Kathy and Salima and Martha and myself will be able to answer them for you. So the first question that came to us was, will we be amalgamating with other colleges like ADA&C? And I can say at this point in time, there's no plan for there to be any amalgamation with any of the colleges. We are looking, and we are already starting to collaborate with other colleges. So right now we have a joint project joint IPC guideline project with four of the other oral health colleges. So we're looking for opportunities to collaborate, but there's no movement towards amalgamation at this time. So there's another question that came in is around, if the college represents the public, then why do we need to pay? Like, why do you as a registrant need to pay? The public should pay. And I'm hoping through this presentation, you can kind of see now why you need to pay. So in the end, you're going to need to pay for a license. So you're either paying us, the college, to regulate your profession and have you involved, or you're going to be paying the government, or you're going to be paying another college or another profession. So just like your driver's license, you need to pay for your permit, but you're paying for the privilege of self-regulation. We got a question around the payment plan. Will the college be doing a payment plan again? The answer at this point in time is no. The reason why we did it in the first place was because of COVID and the shutdown, and we really thought we could make it a lot easier for registrants. In the end, less than 10% of the registrants actually participate in the payment plan, and those that did, it was fairly clunky. There was missed payments, and it put the college in a position where we had to track people down and then fine, and I'm sure it was all over Facebook. So we just really don't feel like we're going to move in the direction of a payment plan again, unless we can ensure that it's more automated. So for this coming renewal, there won't be a payment plan. One of the questions is around endorsing or funding the new Dental Hygiene Alberta Association. And so I want to really take a moment to explain that question. So the Dental Hygiene Association of Alberta launched a few weeks ago, could be a month ago maybe, and we've been asked if we're endorsing it. So associations there's no requirement to have an association. There's no requirement to have a provincial association. Associations are member driven. So from a college perspective, we can't endorse any association. So if the profession, if the dental hygienists in Alberta want to have an association, or they want to have 20 associations, it really doesn't matter to the college. We can't actually endorse an association. It's really up to the dental hygienists in Alberta to decide, do you want an association, and will you support an association, and will you support it by buying the membership? Now the other question is around funding. So we've been asked around, will we fund the association? And that's that's a complex question because of what's going on with Bill 46. But what I can tell you is that we are in conversations with our lawyers, and we're in conversations with the government, and we're in conversations with all the other healthcare colleges to figure this out. For those colleges that are joint, they are a college and an association like AD&C, they have different requirements than us as a standalone college. So there's conversations happening at council right now in terms of trying to figure out this funding piece of it. But I can tell you it's complicated and it's political. And we need to ensure at the end that whatever decision council makes on this will be accepted by the government. So answer to that one is to be continued. Next question is around a communication strategy. And you've probably noticed that our communication tools have been changing. We've gone from a print magazine to online newsletters. We're dabbling in social media, and we're still trying to work our way through our communication strategy. So last year, many of you filled out our communication survey. So thank you. We're using those answers to help guide us. We have a new communications advisor. Her name's Brittany. She's amazing. She's actually hosting and running all of this in the background, and she's helping to guide us to develop our communication strategy. So communication to yourselves, but also to the public and our stakeholders are really important, and we are working towards advancing our communication strategy. I'm going to skip to the last question because it's along the lines of communication and it's around our website. And we've been hearing that our new website's not really that easy to navigate, and we know that for sure. So we're actually in the process of, now that that website's been up and running for a year now, we're doing some analytics on it, and we get to, through Google Analytics and through some other methods, we're starting to understand your journey on our website. So what page do you go to? How do you navigate through the website? What pages you get stuck? Where you go back to? How you try again? And then where you give up. So because the website's been up and running for about a year now, we're actually able to kind of monitor and watch to see the journey. And we have some plans in terms of fixing that. So over time, you're going to start to see the website change over time. So if you have any suggestions for us, feel free to email. We're always open to hearing about your ability to navigate. But we also heard a lot of great suggestions as well that we're taking into consideration. And then finally, the question around why can't registered dental hygienists in Alberta, why can't they vaccinate? Like other provinces, their dental hygienists can and we can't. And what I can say is that because we're a college, we haven't necessarily been able to advocate for the profession to the government, but we have been able to advocate for the public. And so we have done a lot of work in trying to advocate for dental hygienists to be able to administer vaccinations. The administration of vaccinations is actually a restricted activity that we don't actually have. So the only way that you're going to be able to vaccinate is if we get a ministerial order, an exemption from the government. And so we have escalated requests to the government to consider a ministerial exemption. We've also worked with AHS because as the major health provider in Alberta, they would need to want to have dental hygienists vaccinating. Again, we're doing what we can to help get that move forward, but at this point in time, the government hasn't made any ministerial exemptions for vaccinations in Alberta yet. So if we hear anything else, we will definitely let you know. So that is the end of the presentation. I'm going to try my best to stop sharing my screen. Oh, I think it happened. Thanks. And we can open it up now to questions. So I think everybody has the ability to type questions. It'll take me a second for it to load up here. Martha, do you want to take any of the questions? Do you see one in there that you want?
Can you hear me right now, Amy?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just reading one of them. What's the difference between the CRDHA and the DHAA? And Amy, I think that there was a good synopsis there on one of the slides that you, if we could just quickly pull it up, I think it gives a pretty kind of an overarching view of the differences. There it is.
Can you see that? Am I still sharing my screen?
There you go.
Yeah, you can see it?
So okay. Yeah, and I think these are good fundamental differences between the two organizations.
So again, the CRDHA is the college. The DHAA and the CDHA are associations. The CDHA is the National Association, and the DHAA is the newly formed provincial association. So I hope that helps answer that question. There's a question around how many people are listening to the town hall. We have just under 100, but one of the things you should note is that this is being recorded and will be uploaded to YouTube later on. So anybody that can't or hasn't been able to watch this live will have the opportunity to watch it recorded. There's a question around funding. So before the CRDHA, there was the ADHA, which we reviewed in the history slides. Many of those members are paid into the membership, and there was lots of money that was accumulated. Did the college absorb all these funds? So I can't really speak to what happened, but I know that that was over 20 years ago. So my assumption is over the last 20 years, there would have been money that would have been spent towards regulating the profession. So I can't really at this point in time get into that, but that was quite a long time ago. So I can just speak to our finances right now. I know that we're very fiscally responsible, and we make sure that all the money that we collect is put into the right areas. We get our statements audited every single year by an auditor, and we need to ensure that it is transparent. The audited financial statements get put into our annual report, which goes to the government. So in terms of being fiscally responsible, there's lots of transparency around that. What happened 20 years ago, that's something that probably would have to be taken offline with somebody that was here 20 years ago.
If I can just jump in, I think, at that time, the ADHA was also responsible for registering dental hygienists. So there was a bit of a regulatory aspect. They were just called an association at the time. And there's other organizations that currently are still called an association that do regulate their members. So I would assume, and I can't speak to 20 years ago, but I would think that some of that money would have been used for regulatory purposes and not simply just membership at the time as well.
There's a question around, would you advise us to be members of the CDHA and the DHA or choose one? Again, that is completely your prerogative. We as a college won't be making any of those recommendations because it is an association. It's a voluntary membership, and we have no ability to endorse or make that decision. So I would advise that if you're looking at being a member of the National Association or the Provincial Association or both, that you find out what they both do, what they offer, and what you want as a registrant from your association. Yes, Martha. You're on mute.
Can I jump in with one of the questions?
Of course.
Okay, so there's one here for CE, and do we just need to upload the reflection document or will we need to get a certificate? So the reflection document was included as an option if you take a session or an online course where they didn't provide you with a certificate. If you don't have the certificate of completion for the course, you can just fill out that reflection document and submit it with your CE. So hopefully that will allow for, the inclusion of more online courses.
And then for this town hall tonight, you won't have a certificate, so you'll upload it. And I believe in the emails that have been sent out, there is some pretty specific instructions on how to do that. But you'll need to upload a self-reflection document for this one to claim your credits. There's a question here around incorporating auto pay for the next renewal. And I think at this time we're not, Salima.
Yeah, I can take this one. So the way it works is we don't actually store any of your credit card information. Although some people may think that it's stored in our system, it actually goes through a background system to keep your privacy and ensure that we're not losing any data of yours that would be at that high level of sensitivity. So when renewal comes around, you're going to enter your payment as you did last year. Only once, and since there is no payment plan, there's no auto pay function. So every year when you renew, you would end up entering your credit card information at that time, and it's a one-time payment.
There's a question around how the pay of the registrar, CEO, and the employees went up 30%. I'm not actually sure where that would be coming from. So I can tell you that it hasn't gone up 30%. Really not very much. The college hasn't had any pay increases in a very long time. And actually we're working with an HR consultant right now to ensure that our wages are on par with all the other regulatory colleges of our size. And I would say that we're on par with everybody. So I'm not really quite sure where that comment would be coming from.
I can second that.
There's a question on, is it necessary to have membership in an association to practice in the province of Alberta? And again, the college and the association are completely separate. So the only thing that you need to practice in Alberta is a practice permit. You get to choose whether you want to be part of an association. So it is, if you want to practice dental hygiene in Alberta, you need a practice permit and you come to the college for that. It's your choice if you want to be part of an association. And thank you. There's a really nice comment here saying, keep up the great work. This has been really informative. So thank you for the nice comment. We're really committed to ensuring transparency and accountability and better communication. So we're really hoping that we have the ability to do this more often and interact with you in different types of ways.
Amy, there's one here on whitening. I can jump in. Has the college done anything about private non-dental professionals offering whitening services? So whitening is interesting. Whitening itself is not a restricted activity. So we don't regulate individuals that might own and operate a business where they're providing these services. So in that arena, there's very little we can do. We have no authority to actually regulate those businesses. They're not like a health practice. It would be a more of an aesthetic service. They are regulated and with respects to their IPC, et cetera, through Alberta Health or the government.
If you signed up as anonymous to this, yes, you can still collect your CE points. You would just have to log on to the registered database and insert it and use the self-reflection form. Most people actually signed up as anonymous, so that's totally fine. If you want to find out more about the DHAA, I believe they have a website and a Facebook page. So you'll be able to find them online if you want to find out more about them.
There's a question about continuing education and approvals of that.
Yeah.
I can answer that one. So the question is just for clarification, from now on, all the continuing education that we submit will not be approved, but a dental hygienist can be audited at any time. That's correct. So when you enter something, we are trusting you as a professional that you are entering the correct information, you're claiming the correct amount of credits, and then we will be implementing an audit process in the future where you may be audited and asked to provide evidence if something seems like it doesn't add up, or perhaps we need further clarification or further information. So there is no approval. Once you enter something, you'll see right away in your summary information where the credits have counted, and the numbers will change accordingly so that you have a real-time estimate of how many continuing education program credits you need to still get, if any.
Martha, did you want to take the one about the manual template?
The manual template. Oh, I might be behind you guys. Do you want to just read the question out?
Oh, sure.
Maybe?
The CRDHA has a CE manual template. Is there any plans for policies and procedures and OH&S templates as well? These would be appreciated.
Maybe I'm not clear on what the template is that we're referring to. Salima, do you want to jump in?
I don't know what this template is either. If
whoever posted that would like to explain that one further, we'd love to answer it. Do we require insurance liability? Yes. Okay, so if you go back to the dental hygiene profession regulations, you are required under those regulations to have professional liability insurance at a level that's approved by council. So earlier this year, council set those minimum requirements, and then we sent that out in an email. And you can also find that on the login side of our website if you want to go back and see. So if you want to practice in Alberta, you're going to need a practice permit. And in order to get that practice permit, you need to show us some things. And one of them is that you have insurance. Now, Bill 46 is not going to necessarily allow colleges to go and find that insurance for you. We can't go and negotiate insurance contracts. We just require that insurance. And most often you're going to be able to find options for insurance through associations. And so that would be a really good example of a tie between a college and an association. We require the professional liability insurance, but associations will often do the work of finding and negotiating contracts with insurance companies so you can purchase it through them. So yes, please note that we'll be checking everybody to make sure they have professional liability insurance when you renew every year. Oh, Martha, it says that it's not a CE manual, it's an IPC manual. So we have an IPC manual, so will we have an OH&S manual? So maybe do you want to talk about the IPC guidelines that are being developed right now?
Sorry, did you say myself, Amy, or Salima?
No, you.
Yeah, so we are actually currently working on a guidance document with a couple of the other regulatory bodies in Alberta. Is it okay to disclose who we're collaborating with, Amy? I think so. Yeah. I don't think there's issue there. So we collaborated with the College of Dental Assistants, the College of Dental Technologists, and the College of Denturists. And so in this project, we've all come together and developed a guidance document for IPC for practice settings so that we have one collaborative document that we can refer to. We're sort of in finalized stages of that. We've sent the document off to a subject matter expert for review, and then it comes back to CRDHA for some feedback pieces and potential edits. And then, Amy, is it circulated?
It'll go to council.
Then it goes to council. So this has been an ongoing project. It's been just over a year now, but it's going to be fantastic to have a document that is common to these regulatory professionals, because it is a common document that all the professions can refer to in their practices. We don't have a template that we've developed with that. We have a template for IPC that you can refer to and use the guidance document as you're developing your IPC manual. We do not have currently anything for occupational health and safety. Of course, occupational health and safety, that legislation sits separately. If you're working on a document, risk hazard assessments in your practice, if you actually go to the website for occupational health and safety, they actually have some pretty fantastic resources there to develop your own risk hazard assessment and those policies around risk hazards in the workplace. Occupational health and safety is interesting because, of course, it is related to the worker. So it is legislation. You are bound to it as a professional, but it sits in a funny little compartment. We did develop one document for occupational health and safety that you could use as a resource, and that was specific to COVID-19 to help you do some of those risk hazard assessments based on, when the pandemic kind of rolled out, and there was a lot of, we recognize that for sure our practitioners really did need some guidance to help with the PPE, to help with that risk hazard assessment piece of it and what to implement in practice around COVID-19. So we do have that one, and it is on the website.
Salima?
There's two questions that I'd like to address, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one is it possible to delete a CE entry? I entered something twice. What we need you to do is actually, we don't have the ability for registrants to delete, but we could do it on our end if you absolutely made an error. If you can just email info@crdha.ca with the issue and just be really clear about which ones you want deleted, then someone will be able to help you out with that. The other question that I see that I can answer is, will an annual audit of random selection of registrants be done each year to ensure CE? Yes, that is the intention. We haven't rolled out the audit process at this point yet, but everyone will be informed about it once we're ready to go on that. So yeah, but it will be a random selection of registrants each year that we would audit. And that's it.
I think it's really important to know that in the previous system that we had, when you uploaded your CE, every single one of those entries would have been audited on the back end on our side. So every single time you put an entry in, there was somebody inside the college that was approving those. So essentially, every single one of your submissions would have been audited. In our new system, and in the spirit of right touch regulation and trying to put the emphasis of regulation in areas that require a higher level of risk, we're not going to be auditing every single one of your entries every single time you put it in. So our new system allows you to continuously upload your CE, and then we're going to be randomly auditing the registrants just to check to see. And so those audits are seen as something where we can go in, we can see how you're entering, we can check to see if you're entering it correctly. We still need to kind of develop our criteria, but they're there so that we can help to inform you on your continuing competence. And so it is a switch. We're not doing audits on every single entry. You'll be audited once every few years when your name comes up. But that's about as much as we know right now. We're in the process of developing the audit process, and we're also utilizing the best practices and the things that we've learned from what other colleges do for their audits. So random audits is something that most colleges would be doing on a regular basis. And then there's a question around licensing fees. They're always due at the same time. So it's important for you to know that your practice permit runs every year from November 1st to October 31st. And so that won't change. That is the same permit, year after year. So about 2 months before the end of October 31st, so usually at the beginning of September, or even sometimes we'll open it up in August, we'll open up renewals so that people can start to renew. You pay for your new practice permit, and that new practice permit starts on November 1st. So that will always be the cycle that you'll be going in every year.
There's one here, question, why is there no requirement for offices to have WCB, which is a very, very interesting question. So again, Workmen's Compensation Board, of course, is geared towards compensation to workers who have been injured on the work site. Currently in Alberta, there are certain industries that have to have WCB for its workers. Dentistry is exempt from that. So currently, a dental practice does not have to buy into WCB. I would say that this question is an excellent question for an association.
Kathy, this one might be good for you to answer. I think it's around, has the CRDHA's legal advice? What has the advice CRDHA's legal team given to the current council in terms of how to avoid a plethora of potential new membership associations splitting our Alberta RDH numbers? And so I think we're talking a lot about, is it even, you know, is it even our mandate to be having these conversations? Oh, you're mute. You're on mute. Still on mute, Kathy.
Did somebody unmute me and then unmute me back? Anyways, it's not part of the council's mandate to work on association stuff. So yeah, there could be, within Alberta, there could be up to 10 different groups that want to say that they are the association. It's up to the members to decide, I guess, who they want representing them and do their research and go from there.
It's really important to understand that associations are member driven. So if 3,500 dental hygienists in Alberta want to have 10 different associations, then that's what needs to happen. If they want one association, then they need to support the one association. How associations get set up and how they get run and who supports them is not the mandate of the college whatsoever. They're completely separate.
Yep, there's a question that around PDC and multiple courses I can answer. It says, how do you enter all the courses from PDC if you took multiple courses? Seems to be a very long process if they're individual. We are asking that for any conferences you enter everything individually, because some of the courses will fall into different types of activities under the limited or unlimited category. So we aren't looking at it as one complete. Previously, when you were putting up in one complete, like Amy mentioned, someone was actually going through each of those and assigning them into a certain amount of credits for each category. And so you do need to enter them individually. You can use the attendance sheet that you get, which has all the courses on it, as your supporting document for every single one. So you don't need different supporting documents. You can use the same supporting document, but you do need to enter them separately because they fall into different categories.
I just want to recognize that we're skipping over some of the positive comments. So thank you to all who have entered in your positive comments. We're reading them and highlighting them. That's great. Thank you. Does the CRDHA have any plans to monitor social media conduct of registrants? Oh, Brittany, do you want to talk? No. Yeah, social media. Oh, that is so tricky. So what we need to do as a college is we need to create a standard of practice and a guideline on social media. And so that is essentially what we have to do. It's your job as a healthcare professional to be a professional anytime, not just during the time that you're at work, but 24 hours a day. So as a healthcare professional, you need to know that your role is not just with your client, but with your colleagues and on social media as well. From a college perspective, it's tricky. But where we're seeing the other colleges move to is the creation of these standards of practice and guidelines on how to be a professional on social media. And actually, this is not just a conversation that's happening within our province, but nationally as well. Monitoring it and monitoring the conduct, we would probably need to hire a full-time team to do that. So we have to see how we can strike a balance between being on social media 24 hours a day and monitoring versus allowing the profession to self-regulate themselves. So my suggestion is that if you're seeing negative or unprofessional comments on social media, you can contact the college, but you can also take on some responsibility to ensure that your fellow professionals and colleagues are regulating each other. So if you're seeing something that you don't agree with, potentially there's an opportunity for you to private message them and say, you know, I just don't think that's probably very professional. It doesn't look very good for our profession. So that's probably not a fulsome answer, but there is a role for the college to participate in social media, and we will be working with other colleges to help get that sorted out. So, do you want to answer the CE conferences? Do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, there's the one, will the CRDHA be hosting CE conferences going forward?
Yeah.
Or will that be from an association level? So we will be looking to develop some sort of continuing competence education opportunities, but we won't be hosting conferences in the way that we did before. So we will, you know, as we come up with items like webinars and that sort of thing related to regulation and competence, we will provide that type of education in the future. But in terms of larger scale conferences, I think there was another question about how great it was to, you know, have reunions and network with your colleagues and such. I think that sort of thing will need to come from other organizations such as associations. There's a suggestion here that the U of A, perhaps the alumni chapter, could offer those types of opportunities. But a large scale conference is not likely to come from the college mandate. There's another question, I think we kind of answered this, but I'll address it again. How do we know if the CE we uploaded is accounted for, especially when we need to enter them by June? They are accounted for as soon as you enter them, so you will see the numbers change in your summary information right away. Anything that's entered within your reporting cycle or reporting period from November 1st of the first year of your reporting period to October 31st of the third year will count, and the numbers will change in your summary information. So you don't need to wait for anyone to approve anything. Once it's uploaded, it's there. And I think there was one more that I saw. Oh, someone has lost their certificate for the mandatory sexual misconduct course they did in December 2020. Is there any way I can retrieve it? If you uploaded it already as continuing education, then it should be there with your item. But if you lost it, unfortunately, I think at the time that you completed it, you needed to enter your name and save the certificate. So if you didn't do that, you would need to make sure you did that. You may need to go through the course again, unfortunately, to get to the end of it and enter your information so that you can print off a new certificate.
Yeah, Martha, go ahead.
Amy, I just see this question here about social media and conduct on social media. So does the CRDHA have any plans of monitoring social media conduct of the registrants? So I can tell you from my perspective, I certainly don't have the time to monitor social media. However, I can also tell you that we do get social media sent to us. So when it comes into the CRDHA, we have to address it at that level. But currently, I can tell you, I do not comb through social media.
I don't either. It makes me sad. Yeah, there's a prorated. There's a student. Is that the one you were asking?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, you want me to take that one? Okay, so do students get a prorated license fee or do they pay the full amount? Council approved a separate fee for students earlier this year, and so students that are applying for registration for the first time, have never been registered in another province, and are applying within 12 months of graduating will get a lesser fee. That is the only time that we offer a lesser fee than the full permit amount. If you haven't registered elsewhere and you have applied to register within 12 months of graduation. So it's $350 for that first permit, and then the regular fee after that. There's one about online CPR being valid again this year, given COVID. Council's passed a motion to accept that this year, but we are encouraging registrants to get the hands-on in-person learning if possible, so that you don't lose those skills.
The online or the in-person learning is available. They're just in smaller classes. Mm-hmm. So we still encouraging you to try really hard to get that in-person learning.
Yeah. There's another one also about CE credits were not uploaded, for example, CPR. So someone said, I noticed that some of my CE credits were not uploaded. For example, CPR for the last couple of years were not entered. Should I re-enter them? Yes, so CPR in the past was uploaded on your behalf at renewal. This year at renewal that you would have just completed, we did not have a continuing competence module, so we were only verifying that your CPR was valid, but we were not uploading on your behalf. And now that it's open for registrants to be able to upload, you do need to make sure that you have a valid CPR, and it will need to be within the last 12 months come renewal time, or you will not be able to access a renewal application. So make sure that you do have your CPR uploaded and that it is valid within the last 12 months. And then your credits should count as long as the CPR was taken within your cycle. And remember that your reporting cycle starts November 1st of the very first year. So if you're 2018 to 2021, then it's November 1st of 2018 to October 31st of 2021. So if you took CPR outside of that time frame, the credits don't count. They would have applied to the previous reporting cycle. And
there's a question here around will we be required to continue to print practice permits and post them in our operatory? So under the Health Professions Act, you're either required to have your practice permit printed and there or have it readily available. So the Health Professions Act says you need to either have it up in your operatory or have it readily available. So it's really up to you as a regulated health professional that if you're not going to print and put your permit up, that if anybody asks, you need to have it readily available. What does that mean? You can print it and put it in your operatory. You could have a picture of it on the phone. You can also go on to our website on the public register and type in your name and show that you're on our general register. So you need to be able to prove that you are registered. Your employer needs to be able to check to see that you're registered and in good standing. But under the letter of the law of the HPA, you don't necessarily need to have it printed and put in your operatory. Yeah. Somebody just said, it sounds like all the standard documents need to be rewritten. Yes, they do. Everything needs to be rewritten. This is what we're going to be working on for the next year and a half, for sure. There are a couple of individual questions around CE. So if anybody's having trouble with your own personal CE, please contact the college and we can work you through that. Also, Salima is going to be hosting. Salima, do you want to talk about office hours?
Yeah, for sure. So I think this is going to come out to everybody in an email, but what we've decided to do, because as of June 1st, the 120-day rule is going to be reinstated. So if you haven't uploaded your CE yet, and it's going to be more than 120 days soon, you really want to get that in before June 1st. And so what we're going to be doing is you'll get to join me, yours truly, with a couple of office hours sessions. So I'll just kind of hop onto Zoom. You can come join me there, and you can ask the questions you have around CE in terms of uploading your documents, or how do you enter them, or what category they fit in, or some of these questions about numbers not changing, what does the summary information mean, and I'll be happy to spend that time to answer those types of questions. What I will not be able to do is actually just bring up your personal record onto the screen and speak to your specific item because of privacy issues. It's going to be open to more than one person, so I don't want to necessarily do that, but I can certainly answer some of these types of CE questions that we're seeing this evening, and that's going to be held next week, Wednesday night and Saturday as well, so 1 hour each, that I will be available to answer any questions you have around uploading CE or interpreting your continuing competence module items in the database. So I look forward to having many people join, hopefully, with some really good questions that we have, like we have tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah.
A few more questions here before we wrap up. Martha, there's one about scaling units, and I know you love this question, so why don't you answer this one?
So I know this one is a fairly popular question that we do get at CRDHA. I can also refer this individual to an article that we did write and put in the In Touch, and I wish off the top of my head I could remember what issue was in, but I feel like it was 2019. It was either 2019 or 2020. If this person asking the question wants to follow up with me tomorrow as well, just shoot me an email and I can send you the link to the article. But just really quickly, in a quick answer here is, in fact, we don't create that fee guide. The ADA&C created that fee guide. If you're working in a dental practice, my recommendation to you is to read that fee guide. You're going to see in there some explanation around what ADA&C has developed for some of these codes. So I would really, really suggest and recommend you go to that fee guide. If you're an employee in a dental practice, just really clearly read that introduction piece that speaks to how to bill using their fee guide. But again, if you just want to follow up with me tomorrow, I can just shoot you the article on our interpretation of that as well.
Okay, so if you log on to the member side of our CRDHA website, there is underneath practice resources and then past emails and newsletters. You go towards the bottom of the page, February 27th, 2020 mini In Touch. There is an article around our perspective of our, the perspective of the CRDHA with respect to AD&C units of time guidelines. I think that's what you're referring to, Martha.
Yeah.
So February 27th, 2020, there is an article there that I think would be very helpful. There's a question around registration, and do registrants applying for practice permits undergo a clinical or written examination? Anybody applying for a practice permit for this first time has to go under a barrage of stuff. So there is, depending on what program you graduated from, depending on what province you're coming from, everybody needs to go through the NDHCB, which is the written exam. There's our jurisprudence exam. There's all kinds of registration requirements. So again, it really kind of depends on the registration stream that you're entering in from our college. So do you want to answer, maybe give some advice on printing permits?
Yeah, so we are not sending printed practice permits out any longer. we are asking registrants, as Amy mentioned before, to either have them available on your screen when you're asked for them, or you can print them off at home. We do recommend, if you have access to some nice paper and a color printer, you can actually get a pretty decent print off of that. So unfortunately, we're not sending them any longer in the mail. So they will need to be either accessed on a screen or printed off at home. You could also try maybe Staples, send it there, and if you want to have it printed in that quality, they could probably try something like that as well.
Martha, I think there's a follow-up around the units, the very last question.
Yeah, well, that's actually a good question. And it would really be dependent on what the complaint was about.
So do you want to just read the question?
Oh, right. We're getting to the end of our 2 hours
Yes.
here. Okay, so if a member of the public calls to make a complaint about what an RDH is billing, and are you going to refer them to the ADA&C? So it honestly would depend on what the complaint was about. It would depend on if you're working in a dental practice. It would depend, or if you were a practice owner, that would make some significant differences in what that might look like if the complaint was about fraudulent billing. So typically, yeah, and you know what, we could have Lloyd in on this conversation tonight, and he's not here, but he would be the one that would really speak to that. But I would honestly say it would really have to be variant on what the complaint was about and what was billed.
I think we're getting to near the end. The questions have slowed down, so maybe we can talk about next steps. So again, the session is being recorded, and we're going to upload it on and have it available for anybody that wasn't able to attend this evening. If you attended it live, or if you watch it, or any of your colleagues watch it, you can submit for hour per hour credits through our system, as long as you fill out a self-reflection document. Brittany's also going to be sending out a survey tomorrow to ask you what you thought of it, and give us any suggestions for future events or future town halls. And it will also be sending out information about the upcoming office hours with Salima about continuing competence. So I think that we would like to wrap up for the evening. I want to thank Martha and Salima and Kathy for attending. Thank you so much for being here and helping with the presentation. Thank you, Brittany, for putting this all together and making this whole thing flow so nicely. And thank you to all of you who attended. We really appreciate your engagement and your questions. And we hope to be able to be having some more touch points like this in the near future. So everybody take care, and we'll talk to you later.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.